What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Kicks and Picks podcast. Nick, Scotty, and very special guest Martino back with us. Martino, welcome to the pod. Got to be, got to be the 10th appearance for you here at least. We got to get you like some sort of souvenir.
Yeah.
10 feels kind of high. No, maybe half that. I don't know. It's
5 or 6 for sure.
Oh,
definitely the second this year. I think the last time I completely jumped the gun when I was on, I jumped right into whatever Liverpool match that was. I think it might have been the Merseyside Derby.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
We've had Maddie on a couple times. Maybe I'm just I'm grouping you guys as a duo here, but in any case, brother, appreciate you coming back on with us. First show of the summer for us, actually. So we are in full swing. Club World Cup, Gold Cup. But guys, we're like 6 weeks away from Serie A and the EPL back with us. Been an absolute flying summer and it feels like it never even stopped. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Milan a little bit as we have Martino on here. Just generally transfers that have happened so far, thoughts on Serie A, thoughts on the Premier League. We'll get into a little bit of futures talk, the bets that we've placed, strategies we're looking at, and what we think the future outlook is. So appreciate it again, Scotty. Hope you're all is well with you and you're still celebrating Liverpool, still riding that high, because I know I would be.
It is. It's weird though, because they're not in the Club World Cup, so their summer transfer season has started quickly. Lots of guys going out, lots of newcomers in. So it wasn't a long time to celebrate. It really feels like they've moved on to the next. But that's probably for the best.
Come on. Well, I know you're superstitious, but you have plenty of time to celebrate. They had that wrapped up months ago.
Oh, that's true. That is fair.
You guys were chilling.
I think
I was at Carragher's for the match against Spurs. So you guys, since that day, whatever day that was, you guys have been.
No, that is fair. I mean, it was kind of a foregone conclusion around like early April, and so it was just a matter of like when they were going to wrap it up,
right?
In a weird way, because of that elongated period. Like, there wasn't that like singular point of like
elation. Yeah.
Both
of the titles were like that. Yeah. Even the other one was like wrapped up in January, if I remember. So yeah.
Do you feel like at some point the season shifted for you to like, let me just hope Man City and Arsenal finish as poorly as possible, and that turned into like what I'm rooting for? Because I know that's what I was rooting for in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like right around early April when it was clear that it would take a tremendous, horrible turn of events for Liverpool to not come out with a title, it was more so, okay, who's qualifying for Champions League? And unfortunately, it was just there were so many slots for England this year between, obviously United and Tottenham squeezing out one from the Europa
League. Yeah.
And then they had 5 through the coefficient, and so it was like the 1 year where I was just ready to hate watch and root for some of these clubs to like fall out of Champions League. It's like we get 6 slots, and so pretty much everyone but United have found a way in.
Definitely brutal, but we'll get into a little bit of that. Martino, we got you on, dude. Obviously we know how Serie A ended with Napoli lifting that Scudetto. Milan, rough year for Lazio as well. Not that we're not ready to talk about them, but I joked about it just about every week. Like no non-Milan fan rooted for them harder than this podcast. Nobody had more futures money on them than I did. Week in and week out, the books are just giving me these odds where I'm like, oh yeah, Milan could score 2 on Torino. They could score 2 on Lecce. This is no problem. Kept going back to the well. Had a future on them to win the league. Had a future on them for top 4. They obviously did neither. Shades of like Napoli from 2 years ago. Couldn't get the manager situation correct. Players uninterested. I want your full take on what the season was. Not that you necessarily want to relive it, but
I know.
Give us a little bit on what went wrong, what they've done so far this summer, and kind of what your outlook could be going forward.
You see my baseball team right now, so I don't really, I'm a Mets and Jets guy. Every time someone's like, "Oh, rough year for Milan," I was like, I have lived half my life and have not seen the Jets in the playoffs, and they keep expanding the playoffs. So, it's nothing. Yeah, but I mean, truthfully, it was relative to expectations the worst season this century. I don't think there's any disputing that, because some people would say, "Oh, well, you guys were terrible in the mid 2010s," but that going into that year, you're not really expecting much or if at all, anything. They never got anything going correctly. It pretty much seemed like from day one, what they've done already on July 2nd, heading into this season, they've already done more than all of last year, pretty much, in terms of moves, making sales, being proactive, having an actual sporting director. I think that when they started late, once again, that Fonseca basically got in around this time last year. There's no preparation for creating your squad. Hierarchy issues. Zlatan giving press conferences and saying he's calling the shots. Meanwhile, he's not technically an employee of the club. He's an employee for Redbird, who own the team. And then the CEO for Lani is saying,
Oh, I
no,
didn't even know that. That's like
yeah,
news
yeah.
to me. I had
So
no idea.
it's exactly. So that's just everything you need to know. Like Boban was even pressing him in these press conferences or whatever you want to say, pre-match interviews where they have him in the studio and he's like, we don't know what your role is. And he's just like, well, like I call the shots, like no one tells me what to do. And then Furlani has to make a statement saying, no, I literally tell you what to do. I am your boss. And, right there is just a disconnect. Who's talking, who's making decisions. And it trickled on down to the manager situation, which, was much disputed by people. Like Lopetegui, you remember, was the guy, supposedly. Pioli was supposed to be somebody that could have saved his job if they won Europa League, which was silly. You're hinging on someone pulling off something as ridiculous at the time, beating Leverkusen, let alone getting past Roma. Those are indecisive people making decisions, and it trickled down into the season. You oddly saw them beat Real Madrid, and then they would lose games to teams that they had no business losing to. Same goes for not losing to this Inter, who had a shot at a treble, and we know how that ended for them. But they didn't lose to them; they were completely bizarre in some of these big games, and yeah, I mean, they were just terrible. And you were right. Like, they had opportunities throughout the entire season. Can they get within top four? They still finished only 4 points out.
Right.
It wasn't, they were that bad, and they were still somehow in the rear view mirror. So I don't think you were necessarily wrong for trying to bet the top four stuff, but it was a whole season of like, when can they turn it around? Do they have time? And then it's over.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think some of those losses in Champions League really just screwed the psyche, screwed the mentality of the team. We did a preview. We talked about it with Matt, and I was pretty high on what I thought Milan were going to get from the forward position. I was like, Morata, and Scott and I joke about him. I'm not necessarily a Morata fan. I don't rate him, but in my mind, this is a guy whose floor in Serie A is probably 10 goals. Like, if Lukaku could come back and score 10, Morata can probably come back and score 10. He's still a decent player for all the jokes I have on him. He was a nothing. Tammy, even worse, I feel like. I mean, obviously, I don't know if he's ever going to recover from that injury that he had a couple years back or if it's just a Serie A thing now, but Tammy looked absolutely lost. So I thought for sure you guys were going to get more out of that position, and it just didn't happen, right? Pulisic and Leao had to carry really early on in the season. Reinders obviously had a great year.
He was their top scorer.
Reinders or Pulisic?
Reinders.
Yeah.
Reinders is their top scorer in the league. He's a midfielder. And they deployed him into double pivot to start the year.
Right. So you can't have that. And that really, as an outsider, that was really where I saw a huge, huge miss. You can't get less than 0 from your forward position.
No, I mean, they were terrible. Jovic, too. I mean, Tammy and Jovic traded times being injured. Morata, really just a person who is, if he gets you anything over like 12 goals, you're very happy in the league. I know he does a lot of good off the ball, but you and I have this agreement. I'm not sure about you, Scotty, but basically, we're in an age where everybody wants your players doing everything at every position instead of their job, right? Like, I care about the striker scoring goals. I don't really care that much on build-up play, how he does with his back to the goal. Like, can you finish? Because I've seen players that have, good qualities in other areas of their game, but if they're only giving you a 10-goal output, what is the point of you, in my opinion, for the striker? So I know, and especially at a club like this, I'm tired of it. There's stopgaps. We're looking at, players who have, when was the last time I mean, Tammy, I know, had a really good first year, but Roma, a lot of it aided by Conference League. But Jovic, Morata, and him, when was the last time any of them scored at least 15 goals in the league? Right. We haven't had a 20 league goal scorer since Zlatan when he was 2011, 2012. That's ridiculous. Crazy. That's nearly 2 decades for this team. That's insane. And I think the last strike, well, Giroud did it once, and then Carlos Bacca. Out of the past 10 plus years, they've had 2 guys score over 15 goals in the league, and that's taking penalties into account. It's been that bad for them. And you're right. What, you get that production normally, they probably finish top 4, right? Like, that's all it takes, because they're dropping points to like Cagliari, all these other like garbage sides, and not even giving themselves a chance against the top teams. It was a joke.
And I'm gonna like piggyback off that thought. It's not Milan related, but like I kind of said the same thing towards the end of the year about Inter. Like, you're talking about, this is a team that's fighting for 3 titles, but specifically the Scudetto.
Yeah,
you had 2 players, like Lautaro didn't score 15 goals.
No,
he I don't think had a goal since like November. So like, if that's the output you're getting from your forwards, you don't have a chance. You're not winning the title. I mean, yeah, I guess Napoli did it without really a huge high goal score, but
he was
down
also
the stretch, you need your forwards to contribute.
He was also top assister, I believe, with Lukaku. So
right,
or in contention of it at the very end, at the least. I mean, that's great. You're doing it in other areas. I mean, Rangers, it's like, it's always so great to see a player like that produce. And then you look up at the Serie A table for top scorers for the club, and it's him.
Right.
And you're very worried at that point. So that's what they're kind of working on so far that we've seen. I don't know if you saw much of the stuff that I've been quote tweeting on, rumors of their most expensive signing this coming summer is supposed to be at the striker spot. And they're also like in talks to sign a midfielder for upwards of 38 million euro. So that would mean they're going to have money to spend for a guy like that, which is just fascinating. And also tells you the direction that Tarde wants to head in is like Santi Jimenez might be able to get you 10 to 12 goals guaranteed, because he had pretty decent production, all things considered, for half a season, and where he's like kind of like banged up with a weird squad. So we'll see. I mean, Inter have 4 guys valued over 20 million at least as forwards, as goal scorers. So it shows where we are in terms of that. So we'll see.
I also think there's like a difficulty in the modern game right now, where when you're building out a squad, you need to find this balance of having depth, because we have more games in a season than we've ever had. But you also need to have like those 2 or 3 guys that are nailed on, like going to be the top tier contributors. And I think it's a hard balance to find, like, because you're not going to find guys that are willing to like come in and like, who have the ability to contribute 10, 12 goals a season, but are willing to come off the bench for over half the matches. But at the same time, you need to rotate to keep the key players fresh. So it's like a really hard thing. I know like most clubs, even, across, Spain and England, they all kind of struggle with that. And I think that's kind of where Milan found themselves a little bit in this season, where between, like we just talked about, you have Pulisic and Morata and Leao and Jimenez, trying to find like the right core group to kind of trot out week in, week out, but still have that depth to rotate through. I just don't know if it ever really came in the way that they wanted it to.
Because they cut corners, quite simply. They saw Giroud leave, who is a very respectable striker at his level, and they replace him with Morata. None of it's a clear upgrade. Right. It's sort of like, yeah, he'll do better in certain areas. Is he a better goal scorer than Giroud? Never has been. So the only time I think he had his best scoring seasons was when he had no pressure and he was playing in one of the best sides of all time in Real Madrid. Yeah. Where he was coming off, I think it might have been 2015-16, before his big Chelsea move. That year, he was incredible off the bench with that sort of production. So they never had kind of anticipated that. You're getting a loan move from Tammy, and Nick was alluding to, like, he's still recovering from an injury. You want him to go in there. Jovic, I mean, arguably the biggest striker flop of the past 10 years when he went to Real Madrid. Kind of okay in certain spots. So, yeah, I mean, like, listen, that's what they get when they want to cut corners like that. And they try to basically fix it almost immediately, as soon as they could in January, where they flipped him to Galatasaray, and it looks like he's on his way to Como. We'll see. And then they went in for Santi Jimenez, and now they have to replace 2 guys behind them because they're loaning out Camarda. So you kind of, as of today, wondering where the goal scoring contributions are going to come outside of Pulisic taking your spot kicks most likely, and Santi being your only striker. And then Leao is too inconsistent as a goal scorer to really rely upon. So they have big question marks there on top of the other areas.
Yeah, shit, spot on. That's a mouthful. Let's get into those question marks. First and foremost, the guy I am very, very high on that I want your opinion on is Max Allegri. I think he, in my mind, is probably the most disrespected coach there is. I think his results.
You are perhaps one of the number one offenders of the
no,
Max.
But that was when he was with Juve. That's just me hating on Juve. I mean, do not.
I'm just saying you were
on Max.
number one for probably 6 to 10 month period of time.
Listen, Orsolini could go back to Juve and I'll start hating him. So don't confuse that with hating Max. I think his results at Milan, his results at Juve, they speak for themselves. He's often been put in very difficult situations. I'm not sure he's walking into a rosy situation at the moment, but I want your thoughts on him, on the outlook for the team, on any transfers that have come in already, any transfer targets. I hear a lot of names brought up, like Retegui potentially, even though he also just got offered like 50 million to go to Saudi or some shit like that.
Yeah, I have a tin foil hat theory with him, but right. I guess where do you want to start then? Allegri stuff.
Max, what do you think about that? I mean,
I said it back in like January or February or March. I was just like, at this point where they're obviously leaning after the Champions League exit, it looked like Conceição was done for. Maybe he could have saved his job, went a little bit deeper in there. He had Supercopa under his belt. If he was able to push for top 4, I felt like he would have stayed. Everything with Nico Paz, by the way, Mendham, is that he's staying at Como for another year. No one's really.
I think Real just put a new buyback clause on his.
Yeah, I mean they're playing the game the way that it is supposed to be played. They're taking those rules. Diego Luna scored, by the way, so that was a
fucking legend.
1-0. Oh, it's also 2-0. Sorry to break news there.
No, over 2.5. Let's go.
Results. It's the only thing that matters. Constantly people are looking at, like Milan finished second that year, Inter were historical. Yeah, I don't care about the place in the standings. It's about the points gap. That's the important thing, because a place within the standing, you could look at it all the time. You should be like, second place is not that bad. Was it? Because they didn't beat them once. They got embarrassed each time they faced them. And they were at least 15 points off the top every single year since they last won the title a couple of seasons ago. That is regression. That is horrendous. I don't really care if they're making the Champions League. That should just be a standard. That shouldn't be something to be celebrated about. It's celebrated one time after you haven't made it for years, and it's kind of a signal of things are turning around. That's fine to be happy about that. When you make it to a semifinal, you win a league title, and then it starts getting worse and worse and worse, then I don't really care about play style, because that's what a lot of people were kind of clamoring for. And I don't understand that when you're not close to winning anything. What does it matter what it looks like? And the thing is with Max in that second stint with Juve was he stabilized that situation. They were absolutely terrible. And he actually had them competing pretty decently well until Bremer got hurt. He was hurt the year before, sorry. But when Bremer was playing sensationally, that year Inter won that title with Inzaghi, they were going very close toe-to-toe with Inter until they kind of fell off in February. And a lot of people want to point the finger at Allegri and all that sort of stuff. I would like to make the conversation be known that their team is far more overrated than people want to admit.
Yes.
The amount of flops that have come through there with different managers that isn't exactly tied to Allegri says a lot. They literally just sacked their sporting director and allowed him to hire a manager that they are now keeping on because they couldn't anticipate what managers would be hitting the open market. And now they're sitting, on their hands while Tudor takes over in the Club World Cup, and people are trying to convince themselves that they're better off because of it. The Motta situation was also embarrassing. They're run terribly. Coop Miners has been a flop. Douglas Luiz, it's kind of insulting to call him a flop because he doesn't even get on the field. Yeah. They're so poor with how they manage everything. Youth players being sold that are wildly talented that, by the way, Max actually gave chances to and try to help their development while he's told to go and compete, while he's given nothing, essentially. They got banned from Europe because, once again, not his fault. The club was cheating. And to me, I just find it funny where the blame goes when you see where they were headed after they got rid of him the first time and where they've been heading after he left the second time. It's just constantly an exhausting conversation to be had because people want to deflect the blame. For whatever reason, Nick and Scotty, people in Italy and Serie A refuse to blame the players. They like to look at the directors, the owners, and rightfully so on some occasions. But when are we going to stop and say Juve are buying shit players and they're not coming anywhere near close to their expectations on their price tags? Because they have the second highest wage bill. They consistently come up short. They pay for guys like Coop Miners. They don't even have a plan for these guys, by the way. Coop Miners is a guy that's much better closer to goal, and they're playing him further away. Douglas Luiz, I don't even know what their idea is. Thuram was a great signing. I thought he's been awesome for them. But what else have they done? Center back situation? They're like extending Gatti and bringing back Rugani and thinking that's the answer. Like, to me, that is the funniest indictment of where they're at. And how is this Allegri's fault? Because he's not there. He's been gone now. So he gets you results in Serie A. Is his football the sexiest for Europe? No. Milan aren't in Europe, so I don't give a shit. So just go out there, get points, and compete for a title when you're playing once a week. Because I think, personally, Milan have better individual players than Juve do. And I think they're going to add more individual players to that. And under Max's system, I think that they're going to be able to produce a little bit if they get the right players in. Leao on a counterattack under Allegri's system could be devastating. I think Pulisic is going to be producing regardless because he's great with work rate in the first place. And in that system of his, that needs to happen. So I think guys like Salamaker's coming back as well. They actually have a plan. It kind of makes sense. I can't say that for Juve in recent years, and I couldn't say that for Milan prior to this summer because they actually have a director now. So I think the Max hire is good because also who wants to come during Champions League issues,
right?
And all this disaster. Like who? They want to go take another risk with a coach? You miss Europe again, then what? Your financial situation is even worse. Then Leao wants to leave. Pulisic didn't renew because the situation's so bad. He wants to know what's going on. So I think the most stable person that they could have brought in that made sense, outside of maybe Sarri, but Sarri was very hesitant last time because of the way the contract worked.
He went to another team with no Europe.
Yeah.
Transfer budget.
Might be available too.
And now he can't invest money, so he might leave again. I don't know how true that stuff is, but man, I mean, come on. Like, it's just fans who clamor for this stylistically sexy play style. Like, get over it, guys. Like, this isn't, not everybody's tiki-taka Barcelona. Not everything's going to be Saki's Milan. You want to know why they were that? Because you have to have the talent level. Okay? They don't have that. They should worry about just playing once a week and picking up 3 points because that's where you start. They reset. People still think it's like the year after they won the title. You're back to square one now. You have to build yourself back up to learn how to win because a lot of that squad is also gone. I think it's just Leao is the only starter and Magnan. This is all you need to know.
I think you bring up a good point too about just, not everybody can play that tiki-taka style. And I think when you see something like that become popular, it's not just the talent level. It's like there's very specific players that can fit into those systems. And when that becomes kind of like what everyone's racing to achieve, people just start trying to shoehorn players in that don't fit the system, and you're better off pivoting and trying to find like a different niche and trying to find something else that will work, especially if you're starting over and trying to rebuild. You're better off trying to find a more unique system that people aren't chasing, where you can find players that fit the system and get value out of it, as opposed to paying 10, 15 million over what the player is actually worth just because you've got 3 other teams in 2 different countries that are also trying to bid for that same player profile. So I think that's actually a pretty good way to go about it if you're looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, because also, like, I mean, what the argument was of like who to bring in was kind of silly to me. And like nobody was bringing up good options, right? Because you always have fans or supporters that are like, oh, well, you have to do this, you have to do. Okay, so who's your option if you don't want Allegri? Like, who do you think is willing to come in here that's a good manager? Like, some people kept clamoring for Conte. Conte, like stop it. You're embarrassing yourselves. Like, this is a team that's rivaling a wage bill that Roma has. You think he wants to come to that? He's already complaining with Napoli, and he just won the title. You thought he was going to leave that to come here. After that, they publicly commented, Zlatan made a backhanded comment about how he wanted a coach, not a manager, or whatever. It might have been vice versa, which was a shot at Conte, saying that he didn't like his style. He didn't like the way that he did things. And then they won the league title while they were having the most embarrassing season in God knows how long. They had to get this right. And I think this was the safest option with a relatively decent ceiling. I'm not saying that they're going to win the league, but playing once a week with Max Allegri, there's been very few times in which he's even fallen out of top 4. I think it just the one year that he got sacked by Milan was that he was doing that badly. Every other year, he's making top 3 with a terrible Milan team that sold their 2 best players that did not replace them in 2012, 2013. He's shown that he could still do it. I thought winning Coppa Italia and keeping Juve in the top 4 at that time was a pretty damn good job. And I think, Nick, people didn't want to give him credit for I don't know what reason. And I only can point to his style of play.
Yep, 100%.
That's the only thing that I think people have on him. And I think it's only a valid claim in Europe because Europe is the highest of levels. And sometimes you have to change up your style. But it works in Serie A. And they're only playing in Serie A. Like, please stop trying to look for someone else that doesn't exist because it's just not going to happen.
Nope, you're spot on. Hipster modern football by Twitter experts. It just took over the narrative and everybody ran with it. But to your point, you win the league by beating Lecce, by beating Torino, by beating Cagliari. Doesn't matter if it's 1-0. Doesn't matter if you have a striker that leads the league in goals. Everybody wanted Motta. Motta was a visionary. He's the guy. Look what happened. He got worse results, and they didn't look very good doing it.
Max didn't even get a good transfer window heading into the year because they were in
financial. $200 million this past summer.
Yeah,
to get worse.
Yeah.
So
and sold like arguably. I mean, Dean could be a generational type of player or center back. But how good he is already off to Real Madrid like that, and they didn't even give him a chance. And they've had really good players in other positions. I just think the blame at Juve should have been at a lot of other people that wasn't Max. So
100% in agreement. Love the Max hire. I think it's the right move. All right. So let's talk about transfers in, out. Reinders, obviously, we know is the big one that's out. And listen, I think you did really well making people are upset. Maybe you didn't charge. I don't know. You didn't sell.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Charge City enough, knowing City's deep pockets. But I think you made an awful good profit for 1 year's worth of work. So,
I mean, first year was like so, but yeah. I understand like the base of it. There's like FFP tricks that they're doing, right? Like they had to make a profit at the end of the year, which would allow them more breathing room because they just got out of their agreement that saw them get banned a few years ago with Gazidis. So they get the 55 million in up front, the 10 million in bonuses that are easily achievable or for the next fiscal year, because they would be achieved by City this upcoming season and Milan would get that money. I personally believe if you don't have to sell, you shouldn't. Sometimes if a price is too good to be true, then you accept it. I didn't necessarily think that was the price, but I understand where they were coming from. I think there are arguments to say he might have just hit his ceiling. He is in his prime. How much better can he get and how much more of a price you could get? I would have argued they could have got closer to 80 million considering some of the players that they purchased already this season and some of the players that they sold off that had no business going for that sort of money that they went for. So yeah, I mean, listen, it's all about who you replace it with, right? Everyone hated the Tonali sale. It was record money. Okay. How do you replace him with it? They didn't do a good job of it. Obviously that's easier said than done and a fairly obvious statement to make. No one's going to care about how much money they made off of Reinders if they replace him with more Yunus Musas, and no insult to him, guys who add nothing. Right. So if you're going to replace them, and this time the excuse is Tare is the director. They didn't have a director for 2 years, essentially. Right. They sacked Maldini and Masada, and it was just Furlani, who has zero football experience, Moncada, who had no experience outside of being a scout and is younger than, I think, whoever's age 40. So, I mean, he's very young, inexperienced, and then Zlatan's there doing whatever. That's not really a structure. Maybe they have some better ideas now. I think the Richie signing of getting him in, I don't want to like jump the gun on everything here. We're talking about all these transfers, but that's a good start. Like it made sense. And then Modric is obviously coming in. That's been confirmed. Once a week, 2 players, like you could already see the shift, right? Yep. One's one of the greatest players of all time. a leader no matter what. You don't really have to question that. You question Musa and some of these other signings that they had the year they sold Tonali. And then Richie is a proven Serie A player. Ceiling could be debated on what he brings, but the floor is still there. He's going to be a reliable Serie A player who's already been capped over 100 times in the league, was a captain at Torino.
That's a lot of things.
Respectable team. Sure, he was inconsistent last year, but what players aren't going to be inconsistent at that club? Like, I seriously, like some people, I think, have too high of expectations. That club is chaotic. And you see by the way that owner runs it. So I'm okay with how they've been approaching it so far. Yashadi is a bit of a risk. If they get that over the line with Club Brugge, look great in Champions League, but so did CDK at times. How does he transition to a big club like that? Only had one big year at a relatively top club at Club Brugge because he was in Switzerland before that. So there's not much to go off of. But I think the approaches are smart. Teo needs to go. That's 30 million most likely.
It's not confirmed yet.
With 1 year left, that's as best as you could hope for, to be quite honest. And then we'll see what happens with Chow. They could sell him to Como. Como are interested, willing to offer 5 million a year because their owners are insane, and Fabregas is demanding that. We'll see what happens. And then Musa is kind of the last one. Napoli rumored to have 25 million ready to go. Furlani comes in asking for more, which is crazy. It's like you're negotiating with Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men. He's about to let you go and get off, and then you ask him for something more. Like, the fact that he went to go ask for more after they offered 25 million was insane. But supposedly Forest and some other clubs are interested in purchasing him. So, hey, man, I think 25 million for Musa would be a hell of a price because if he stays another year and does so, he's not going to be worth a dime. So to sell him off now, I think is the right move. And then you're suddenly looking at, 55 million for Teo, 65 for Reinders. And then whatever sales end up happening with some of the other players, you get 100 and something million to play with, close to 150, because they also sold Kalulu. That's a decent amount of change to play with. And I know you're probably terrified.
For Serie A, that's like a billion.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. It just depends what idiot you have handling the money. I would assume we don't have an idiot this time.
He didn't have that much money in 7 years at Lazio, so he's not going to.
I mean, Richie, I think is his most expensive ever signing. Yeah, probably right. Crazy. Because wasn't it Moriki was the highest in that?
Don't remind me.
20 million. I hate to bring it up. I mean, yeah.
So I'm sorry. Is Teo not official? I thought that was like.
I think they wanted it. They're at the Club World Cup, so I think they thought they were going to get eliminated, and so they kind of stalled it for a little bit. But that one's not in danger. I think it's just a matter of what's happening with the Club World Cup because I think he knows no one in Europe is willing to pay for him and give him money.
Yeah,
and he realized that. And his best opportunity at this point is not coming back to a place where he burned bridges.
Right.
I think everyone's at fault for this situation, but anyone acting like he was a professional in any way in his last year with the club is lying to themselves. I mean, from the water incident and not tracking back in week 2 against Parma, all the way up to his dive against Feyenoord, I don't think I need to know anything else about where his head was at. And I'm kind of an old grumpy man now where I don't defend players for that kind of stuff.
You can't.
Because when people are making excuses that Paolo Maldini got sacked, so that's why he has a shit attitude, I'm just like, you never had a job in your life then.
Right.
Yeah.
Does everybody love their boss? Hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
Being professional.
I should drop my performance now. And also, like, he sabotages his career by doing that.
So I say this all the time in, the criteria for defenders used to be defending. And that was never exactly Teo's strong suit. He's a good defender, a capable defender. He's not a world-class defender. And you overlook it. You overlook it when he's contributing 10 to 15 goals a year and he's making shit happen on the counterattack and he's putting in the effort. Well, when you start losing that, what value do you bring to the team? And no, I'll give you 100% credit on that. You've been critical of him since day one. I know I give you a lot of shit about Leao. That's just more me and you having some fun, but you've been exceptionally consistent about criticizing Teo, and he deserves it. So
it's just about what his job is, like you said. I understand modern day, and I know Scotty deals with the same thing when Trent was still at Liverpool, was like, Yeah, he's phenomenal in the phases of the game that is asked of fullbacks these days. But when it comes down to one-on-one defending, game is on the line, you need to stop somebody, and you're having those consistent issues, then yeah, answer the bell. Like there is criticism and it's warranted because as great as it is you contribute and you do a good job offensively. If you cannot mark somebody, if you can't defend someone properly off the ball, we're not even saying like one-on-one, the guy has the ball, you have to stop him. It's about marking, looking over your shoulder, making a conscious effort to be on your man and prevent him from that. That lack of concentration has nothing to do with the sporting director. That has nothing to do with the owners sucking and being losers. That is your job. That is in your control. What you can control, you should take care of. And he did a terrible job of it. And people, for whatever reason, for the last 18 months, want to excuse it. If you want to rip on other players because they're crap, why is the standard accepted by him? Magnan got more shit because he was doing a poor job. Leao, rightfully at times, getting shit for being inconsistent. Teo, no, because Maldini loved him. We can't critique him. Because he's diving against Feyenoord and not tracking back. We can't do that. And I love the player too. It's just the realistic thing is I love the club more and I want to see them win. And if you're a hindrance to that, then there's the door. It's simple.
The fullback whose primary function is attacking more so than defending is a luxury. And sometimes it works in team setups where you have, two great center backs or a great defensive midfielder that can cover. So Trent obviously had that for years. And then, last year or two hasn't had that as much, gets exposed. And so I think that's probably also a symptom where we did see, Milan's defense take a step back in the past season. And then that just exposes Teo's inability to defend that much more. So if you have the setup and you can afford to have your right back or left back bomb forward and play more, in an attacking role, great. But once those pieces aren't all fitting together, you really need to ask them to do the defensive duties first and then get forward when the opportunity allows it. And if you don't have the player ready and prepared to do that, whether it's a mentality thing or physical thing, it struggles.
Kessie never replaced.
Right.
How many times he used to cover for these players, win the ball, even Salamakers, people give him a hard time. That guy would work so hard off the ball and win it because you know what? You could deal with it and you can mask those issues. Very similar to what Steph Curry is in the NBA. Steve Kerr had to say it all the time. I can't hide you on defense, right? We could have all the great players like Draymond when Clay was really good, great wing defender. All these guys could stop him and you wouldn't notice Steph Curry. The second that defense got worse and guys weren't able to cover his ass, you saw how poor he was. And the same thing I think applies to Teo. And again, and I say this too, at his age, how much longer is he going to be able to carry the ball 60 yards up the field?
Right.
Yeah.
You can't do that. And also he looks bigger. He doesn't look as good. And they did a poor job, don't get me wrong, of getting backups in there to rotate with him and give him a break. But also, if that's the case, then ask to sit down. Say you have muscle fatigue. Because when you're going in there, you have expectations. You put the shirt on. You're on the field. You're going to get judged like everyone else. If you're not able to play, then don't. It's just there was a lot of excuse making for him that I didn't find warranted. I think how they handled his contract negotiations and how they were going about it, sure. But I mean, everything that he controlled, he was terrible. And it was longer than just this past season.
Yep.
People who said it wasn't that are just lying to themselves because he played like decent at center back for a couple games. It's 2 to 3 games. The entire body of work was poor. And you're also asking the best left back in the world. When was he at that level the past 2 years? He wasn't.
Yeah.
So just please stop. That's my thing.
Completely agree. I think like DeMarco for me, same situation.
I think he's more pathetic, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you can make that argument, but I mean, same type of thing. So I'm with you 100%. Scotty, you hit the nail on the head. I think like that's the quote of the episode, man. Like it's a luxury. I think you're so spot on. So shout out you for that. John, Reno in the chat. Thank you guys always for tuning in, for engaging. Check out Reno's show if you haven't. My man is off the rails all the time, but he is bringing hard-hitting Serie A transfer news. So shout out Reno. We talked about the departures, Martino. Let's just quickly, any targets for you in your mind. You mentioned potentially having up to 150 million to spend. In your mind, what are, you don't have to necessarily give me players, but what are the target positions you want to upgrade? What's going to make the transfer window successful for you?
So I like Jimenez as the right back currently, or one of the fullbacks. I think he's very talented, good teenager. Real Madrid, another one of those guys that they have a buyback option for. Milan will have to figure that out. I think both fullback positions. Basically, he's not a guaranteed right back starter. Teo on his way out, so you have to fill those two holes. If you sell a center back, replace one. As of right now, I don't see them doing that. Just because I don't know. It feels like 4 center backs, a fifth for an emergency while you play once a week, isn't of grave danger and risk. Again,
do you think they hold on to Chow? You think
Say that again?
You think they're holding on to Chow then throughout the summer?
I think it's they already accepted Como's offer, so they're willing. They're willing to get rid of him. He's just unconvinced by it because he wants to play for the national team, because he's debuted for them. Leverkusen have interest. That's a far greater opportunity. There is risk with joining Como. The project looks fun. It looks good. They're investing. Fabregas is there, and everyone keeps asking and beckoning the question, for how long? Because they know if you have aspirations, even if you have a stake in the ownership, which you can get out of, how long are you there? How long are you going to be with that project? Is it worth Chow getting up and leaving a club like Milan, where he still would have an opportunity to produce at a club like that? Or, maybe another club comes calling. And from what I understand, Leverkusen weren't willing to move off of that. And there has been reports in talking about incoming players still. Granit Xhaka was one of these names that was floated. Depending on a Musa sale and possibly 2 other guys like Pobega, Adley, Benacer, all guys who are going to be on their way out. Those guys leave, they get a little bit more cash. Maybe they reopen talks and dialogue with Leverkusen. Okay, we would like Xhaka. Would you be interested in Chow? But the price for Chow has to be there, which I think would be around 25 million. I would have sold him off to Newcastle last year. But right now, out of all these players in Allegri's system, I think he's actually like the best option. It doesn't say that much, but I think he's been far better as a deeper center back, because Milan tried playing this more modern style where all these guys are high up and pressing. He doesn't have recovery speed for that. When he was playing at his best at this team, it was when they were on that Champions League semifinal run against Spurs. He was great. Just playing further back, not as much responsibility, good in the air, some decent passing ability. But they're not going to dump Pavlovic. They're not going to get rid of Gabbia. You have squad limitations where you have to keep Italians. And then Tomori. I would personally sell Tomori because it kind of makes the most sense. Least upside, making the most money, could probably get you over 20 million from a Prem team that could use a player like that. Maybe a third choice center back for a respectable side, maybe. I would sell him, but it's interesting to see who max values. That's kind of the difficult part right now, because the camp isn't starting for another week, I believe. I guess the targets. The rumor is, so I go off of like what Tade is saying and then what the rumors are in the papers, right? Because we know Italian newspapers, you might as well try and solve Enigma because they don't make sense. You're sitting there trying to decode what they're saying. And if you ever translate Italian articles, and I know Nick would do it, Scotty, I'm not sure how often you do, the translations are always hilarious. They're making a sensational move soon. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. It's vague. It could mean many things. Sensational is is this shockingly stupid like Emerson Royale, or is it sensational in the sense of ambitious? So basically, Tade gives an interview in the newspaper and he says, we are looking for a striker with similar characteristics to Olivier Giroud. And the first thing you think of Giroud is okay, really just a goal scorer inside the 18-yard area. If he gives you anything outside of that, it's pretty good, right? Link-up play was better when he was younger, but he obviously can't run anymore. He doesn't run in behind the defense, was never really that kind of guy. So you're okay, that seems interesting. Then multiple reporters are saying Antonio Vitiello, Luca Bianchi, and are saying, yeah, Milan's most expensive transfer of the summer will be the striker position. It's going to be valued between 40 to 50 million. Well, that makes sense because Yashardi will probably be worth around 38 million if they get that done over the line. So the most expensive signing is going to be striker, which I do find interesting and I don't hate. But like Giroud,
it's tough, man. The striker market this summer is so inflated.
It's never going to stop.
Ridiculous.
Right?
Yeah.
Kristovic is like going for almost 30 million.
Yeah.
Is what Lecce want. But that's what they're asking. You know, these clubs are ridiculous. But the only player price-wise and profile-wise to what Tade was saying that made any sense whatsoever was Retegui.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that popped into my mind was like, okay, that 50 million euro release clause. Ivan Juric, you guys know better than anyone who watched the Prem and Serie A. I don't know how he got this job.
Me neither. They're just
nobody.
You want to talk about hitting the reset button?
I
That's what
understand.
this team's doing.
Awful job at Roma. I'm zero defending that. Southampton was one of the dumbest, yes, let me take that job after how I just got fired situations I've ever seen. It was a sinking ship there anyways. He was never going to save it. So, like, that's whatever. But he was terrible. And his style, comparatively to Gasperini, doesn't make sense on all fronts. Yeah. And if you're Retegui heading into a World Cup year, why do you want to be there? And again, yeah, sure, Saudi links, all that kind of stuff. They're offering above the clause, but I don't think he wants to leave to go there. Do Milan do that? And then also, like, is it make sense for them? I agree with it to an extent of getting someone that is worth a good amount of change in that position. Because one, Santi isn't a guarantee because of, he's there for 6 months. The directors that brought him in are no longer here or making those decisions. Same thing with the manager. So if he also wants somebody, you're going to have to add. And I was just saying it earlier, Inter, multiple guys worth over 20 million at the strike position. Napoli, they're looking to add more guys that have that quality. They paid 30 million for Lukaku. Still interested in Luka, Darwin Núñez, all these other guys. They were interested in Jonathan David. Juve are going to have a situation where they might have Muani. We'll see what happens with Dusan. And then they just got Jonathan David. These teams that are all competing ahead of Milan, that have money similar to Milan, are all adding in that position. And I think the only negative to what they're aiming for and the players they might be targeting are that they kind of play like Santi Jimenez already. So it doesn't really change up the situation. Maybe it plays into Max's tactics that he doesn't really need like a super athlete up top, but it's kind of like two guys being a one-trick pony. That worries me if they end up doing that. But they're going to be around guys who are awesome creators in Pulisic and Leao. And then we'll see how the other midfielders develop. But the only thing that makes sense is Retegui. I floated the idea, and I guess you guys, you could laugh at me if you want. I think Dusan Vlahovic on a 1-year deal, depending on price, and obviously a substantial pay cut, is worth taking a risk on, in my opinion.
20 million.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the number.
That's the number. I don't think
your number. That's your number, I would say.
Yeah, then I think that's a totally fair number, to be honest with you. It's a striker market that's insane. He's still relatively young. He's terrible in certain aspects. Do not get me wrong. I am not going to argue with you. No worries. But there's
not that dissimilar to Morata, though, to be fair.
Yeah. I think there's just more goal production in a really poorly playing Juve teams. Yeah. I don't think it's all on him. I think they just have guys that are not that great and help him creating. He can't pass worth a lick. I get it. I think he's a good athlete and he's still producing. Like if we look at his worst seasons, I'll pull him up. They're not as bad. And guess what? Compared to a lot of Milan strikers, even the worst Dusan seasons. So I don't know. I think he's kind of worth taking a look at because who are their other options they're going to be able to spend money on?
Skamaka with no knees, with what, 3 knee surgeries, Johnny, in the comments here? I don't know about all that.
I don't think they would spend the money on that because they also didn't even want to spend money on Luka.
Yeah.
I didn't even think Luka. Yeah. So, okay, so how about that? Luka for 30 million or Dusan for 20? Who are you taking? Wow, you really even have to think about it. That's interesting.
I mean, for me, Allegri's familiar with Vlahovic, but I don't know if that works in his favor.
Luka's how old? 22, 23?
Yeah.
But
Dusan's
I don't know.
25. Dusan just turned 25, so he's only 2 years old.
Okay, he's younger than I thought he was. I mean, one guy has a proven track record of scoring goals in the league, whether I like him or not. So
yeah, exactly.
Low risk move. But I said the same thing about Morata, and he contributed nothing. So I don't know. You're not going to get me to sit here on my show and praise Vlahovic. So
no. And I think you're right. I think you're fine in saying that. But this is also a guy who had over 20 goals in Serie A 2 straight years.
Right.
He's had every single season. And we think he's a flop, and especially for wages prices. Like, he's actually like gotten 10 league goals every single year. He was awful this past year.
Listen, that's all you can really ask for. It's just that he went for 60 million, 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago?
No,
I mean, that's 100 million in today's money, right? In today's wonky transfer valuations, he goes for 100. You know what I mean? So that's just
that's what Juve do, though, because they knew he was only staying in Serie A, and the only other team that can conceivably have put up anything against them was Milan. Right. Milan wasn't going north of 40 million. So Juve do the thing that they always do. We're going to inflate the prices within Serie A and price everybody out, and we're going to get the guy that is highly coveted by everybody. And that's what they did. Yep. That's exactly what they did. And they overpaid for it because his salary is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life.
Scotty, how much for Darwin?
Asking price is like 70 million euros, which is kind of odd. Napoli aren't paying it. I think I think they're basically trying to get Atletico to cough it up because they know Atletico is good for it.
And that's the thing. And listen, I love Darwin Nunez as a player. He's not a $70 million striker. No. He's not a forward. He's not producing that output. He's a phenomenal guy that's going to run for 90 minutes and do whatever the hell you ask of him. But he's not scoring goals to warrant $70 million. So, I mean, I guess to your point, both of your points, who really is out there for a reasonable amount of money?
That's what I'm saying. So,
it's inflated.
It's just going to stay that bad. Just goal production wise, also had been under Allegri, had 16 goals in that 23-24 season in the league. That's still not that bad. And we talk about it. That's an awful playing team. Yep. I also think change of scenery for someone like him matters. But ultimately, I think where we know where his head is at in terms of his career is where he chooses to go. If he wants to go to Turkey, then I don't think he cares. And it's not even a slight at Turkey. I just think where you could turn your career around and do great things with it while also getting decent money is probably staying in Serie A and probably staying with Milan. Maybe that sounds biased, but I think that's better situation than going to Turkey, being kind of like in that carousel of strikers that move around in that league versus going to Saudi as well. I think this would be the best path for him. 25 is still young for a striker. It still is. I'm not saying he's ever going to reach the heights that he was lauded to reach. I just still think he has a pretty decent ceiling, and he's able to capture that if he just gets his head on right and goes to the right place for him. Because guess what? Yildiz is amazing. What a talent. What a player. I think he'll be great for a while. Still not better than current Leao and Pulisic. That combo of Leao and Pulisic is a far better combo. And then playing with Luka Modric and some of these other guys that'll probably be in the midfield is a much better situation to be in offensively than Juve. And that might sound biased, but I think that's just indisputable.
Okay. Fair enough. So gun to your head, hopes, expectations. Where do you think Milan's going to finish this year?
Hopes and expectations. Dude, I'm a cynic.
Join the club.
Hey.
You're with the right two guys.
That's a fact.
I know, yeah, but I don't get why you're a cynic, Scotty. I don't get that one.
I'm in a league with two backed or country backed clubs that can spend absorbent amounts of money. And listen, FSG are finally. This is not a Liverpool pod, but we're kind of through the rough part of the capital expenditures, so Liverpool can actually spend money in transfers now for the first time in like a couple of years.
Yeah, so, thank that trade to the Giants to help finance that. No, what expectation should be for this team is to win it all. Absolutely. You're playing once a week. On paper, I think you have the talent to do it. If this Napoli team on paper this past year did it with their injuries, and I know Allegri isn't Conte, but guess what? He's the next best thing of the past 15 years in Serie A. I think Conte is a better manager, but that's besides the point. I think that they should be challenging for it. Expectations in reality, top 4. I don't really see. I think top 3 is attainable. I have massive question marks with Juve and Inter. I have question marks with Atalanta. I think all 3 of those teams and their managerial situations, on top of their talent situations, are wonky. I don't trust Kivu. I think that's a shockingly panicky hire that they obviously did not anticipate Inzaghi leaving. I think it tells you by that hire. Juve Tudor is a joke. For me, with Napoli and Conte as of today, they absolutely should be the favorites. Some people who are like, oh, he can't juggle like Europe and Serie A. He's done it twice. He's done it multiple times. He just sucks in Europe. He doesn't suck in the league. There's a difference. And they're looking to add players. They have money to play with. I think the Osimhen situation might hurt them, but I know you're like kind of like a Roma guy, unironically, Nick.
Listen, I'm going to go through the odds right now. So
yeah, go for it.
Napoli favorites plus 200, Inter plus 250, Juve plus 450, Milan at plus 500. The next team is Roma at plus 1,000. So
you get plus 1,000. I'm seeing 1,100.
Even better.
Either way, yeah, I know. I had Napoli. I got them at like a plus 240 number a couple weeks ago. Perfect. So I'm really happy with that movement. I think I texted you about it. For me, sorry, Scotty, I have a Napoli and City parlay. I think your window has been amazing for Liverpool. I think it's arguably been.
You're talking to a cynic. It's totally fine.
Great window. I think it'll be between you two. We'll see if Arsenal is actually serious. By the way,
never.
But should I just like talk about the Napoli pick? I got him at plus 250.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'm sorry, I kind of don't see why they shouldn't.
Right.
And obviously they've reflected that in the latest updates. I have a hard time talking myself out of them. Outside of like, I think there's so much negativity within the Milan fan base that they don't want to say Scudetto. Oh, obviously, window's not finished. We see where they're at right now. But for me, Conte, Napoli, like, he's going to get wingers that he's wanted. They already added Kevin De Bruyne. Like, that is massive momentum. I know
his legs are kind of gone, man.
His injury history, sure. But you know how it is. He's 30 in Serie A age. So
right, he's young.
How healthy is he going to be is ultimately going to decide their titles, I think. I just don't. I would actually argue. I think Roma's the best value outside of these main four. It's kind of hard to argue it. Plus 1,100 is far greater. I think they're a lot closer to like Milan, Juve, and Inter than they are like the Atalantas and Lazios.
Absolutely agree. So
I know they won't repeat that run that they had. I think a lot of it was kind of catching lightning in a bottle, but they do have talent. Like they've done stuff in Europe before. They're not completely terrible. They have an upgrade at manager. Some of these players have been in a system similar to his. Mancini used to play for him. So I'm not like overly worried about that. I just know they have financial issues. Shocker.
So I'm going to agree with almost everything you said. Where we like, and we have to take into account where we are today. It is July 2nd.
Yeah.
The window is what it is. It's not, everything isn't really fully happening. So we obviously, these odds will shift before the kickoff of Serie A. As of today, I do agree. Napoli deserve to be favorites. I think they're going to upgrade key positions up front. They're going to bring in another striker. They know that depth was a huge issue for them. They're the defending champions. They deserve to be favorites. They would be my pick, gun to my head today, to win the league again next year. I think there's absolutely no value on Inter and no value on Juve. Agree with you 100%. The two picks that I would make today are Milan at plus 500 and Roma at plus 1,100. And I don't necessarily think Roma are going to win the league, but exactly echoing, if you missed what Martino said 30 seconds ago, hear me say it here again. They are much closer to winners of the league than they are to the teams behind them. Atalanta, Lazio, Fiorentina, Bologna, those teams don't have any chance at winning the league. It's not possible. So, yeah, I think Roma represents a lot of value, provided they finish with a roster as good or better than they are today on July 2nd.
So so like how do you guys...
they get it forward? If they, make a couple shrewd buys, they have the coach now that proven has trophies, that knows Serie A inside and out, that can do this for them. I don't see it with Juve. I don't see it with Inter.
So that my question was going to be because, sometimes people are just like, I know you and I, Nick, for sure, we don't agree with this thinking. I don't know about you, Scotty. Some people just don't want to put futures down like on a day like today. Because they're like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. Yes, that's the beauty of it.
That's why the number is what it is.
Yeah, and I just think everyone has different like foresight for how they view something going to be playing out. That's why I love grabbing City, because I'm skeptical of how Arsenal are going to back their market. And that was also when Arsenal were the favorites when I took City. So I really liked it even more then. I don't understand if you aren't in the guaranteed Napoli camp, why you wouldn't look to what you see right now and say, we can make some moves there. Arguably, Inter's a terrible number, because what we just saw yesterday with the Hakan Çalhanoğlu nonsense and that beef in the locker room on top of the manager, plus 240 is garbage. And our good friend Andrew Pissarro hates that number. He says he hates betting on numbers that are like below like 300, so he wouldn't even want to like touch that kind of stuff, which I kind of get. I think with the Prem it's a little different, so I get where he's coming from. Juve to me is like it's just, if it wasn't Tudor, I think you could try and convince me. Right. But they just have issue. They still have that stink that they've had the past few years, that you don't trust what's happening. Okay, if I'm not looking at it through my lens, Milan at plus 550 is not that bad a number. Because it's also an annoying thing to hear from other managers after they beat you and they say, oh, that team actually has the best individuals. They're just a terrible team. They just can't play together. I think Sarri said it. Ranieri was also someone on the record saying Milan have the best players. They just have no idea like how to put it all together. And that's coming from that's also good in the national team. But that's also coming from a guy who just took a group, like a band of misfits almost, put them together and had them challenging in great ways in the second half of the year. Milan can also spend a lot more money. I think that number could move. So that's like the thing that is best part about that number, is that this team today is probably going to fill in 4 more players. And seeing those players that they're replacing, you can only go up from there.
Right.
Musa gave you nothing. Jovic gave you nothing. Teo gave you something, but it wasn't, elite level. We had Calabria as our right back still. Like, there is room for improvement and money to spend with a respectable director and a guy who wins in this league. I just think that out of the top 4 numbers, Milan's easily the best value. Roma in that odd space in between, that's great. And the rest is, I wouldn't even bat an eyelash at. It's just not worth looking. Atalanta, I think, is probably due in for the biggest regression.
Yes, absolutely. No, I'll just touch on 2 things you said before we get Scotty's pick for the odds we gave out. Yes, you guys know me well enough. My betting strategy is I try to get the best number I can as early as possible. And that's what those 2 numbers represent to me today on July 2nd. So could they move? Should they move? I'm hoping they move in our favor, and I want to lock them in now. You mentioned Andrew and his strategy. At this point in the season, a month, 6 weeks before the season, I'm not putting any money down unless it's plus 500 or better. I'm looking for 4 digits, quite honestly. That's why I like the Roma number. Because chances are you can get a team that you like, or a team with a realistic chance at winning, around December or January at plus 300, 400, 500. So why would you lock that up now unless you have a really, really strong belief? So that's why I'm drawn to those 2. But I've given you all the logic. We will certainly do a Serie A preview before the league starts, and this can all change. But gun to your head today, Scotty, who do you like? Sorry, Martino, you can go first.
No. Let Scotty go, and then I have a question after that.
Well, I was just going to say, Nick, the reason why you would consider taking a player at a team at plus 500 is if you're looking at maybe cash out early, right? So if you want to take somebody like Milan now at plus 500, given that their transfers are going to come in, the odds are going to go down. Their first 4 games are Cremonese, Lecce, Bologna, Udinese, and then they host Napoli. If you go into that Napoli game and you're looking at maybe 10 points in the first 4 games and they get a result there, you're going to tell me that number is not going to be substantially lower than it is now?
And that's a great strategy.
You could cash out then and then just wait, because then after the Napoli game, they have Juve, Fiorentina, Pisa, Atalanta, Roma. So it gets a little bit harder. you could probably buy back in again if you wanted to wait until December around plus 500. But at least you've kind of cashed out, probably gotten 2x your number or 2x your investment.
Definitely.
And go from there.
In 6 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever it is.
Of those teams,
that is a substantially solid strategy.
Yeah, I was gonna say of those teams, Milan is probably the one that, like, just because what Martino's saying, there's probably gonna be 3 or 4 players coming in. I would guess one of those is gonna be like a pretty big name that would cause line movement. So there's opportunity there. Their schedule in the opening month looks very doable, and they have I wouldn't say a favorable matchup, but just getting Napoli at home presents them with an opportunity to get a big win that could separate them out a little bit in the title contenders, at least in the early stage of the season.
Love it. You were gonna say, sorry.
Yeah, no, because I almost forgot. I wanted to ask it at the start, basically, and it even leans into the Prem in every single top league. Club World Cup. How much does that factor in fatigue-wise, getting started off at seasons? It's late. You're talking 5 weeks from now. We start. How do teams recover? Guys coming back from vacation, late July, early August. Who gets affected by that? How do they decide to ease them in? Because teams are playing at a record number of games that we have never seen before. And it truly affected Inter.
Yep.
Inter doesn't play that many games. They likely win the league title. It changed everything. And especially when Napoli's playing once a week.
Yep.
How much does it catch up?
And guess what year it is, boys?
Inter and Juve. Inter, I think it's devastating for them. I think Inter, it's a big issue. This team was already tired. You told them to go play another month. Hilarious, by the way. I love it. They're going to have those issues. They're the oldest team in the league. They're one of the older top teams competing on all fronts in all of Europe. That's going to be a problem. They don't have a lot of money. They have to sell players to improve. It looks like they're selling off one of their better players. Barella, I respect this player. Classy guy. I think he is going to burn out. I think his career is going to burn out. I don't think he's going to be able to reach a lot of heights, because this is also the problem with Inter's project and how they were trying to stabilize it with their financial issues. Was we're starting our guys and kind of essentially running them into the ground, hoping that we can capture these trophies and win these trophies. Did he fall off? Does he deserve critique? Yes, absolutely. But like, he can't be playing like that every game. Like, you will get drained, like we've seen, and they're falling off drastically. And the mental repercussions of how that season ended and that final went for them. And Kivu was rocky. Like, they weren't playing well against inferior opponents. I know you can't take away too much, but I just think that kind of stuff lingers. And Inter, I believe, played more matches in a singular year than any Italian team of all time. And they're placed second at plus 240. You know, Juve too. It's just, I don't know. To me, I also like factor that in a little bit with the Prem, but squads are so much deeper over there. It's kind of hard to take away too much.
Yeah, well, let's get into that right now. But before we do, just a reminder what year it is. It's our favorite year to remind people what year it is. AFCON.
Yeah.
Don't ever sleep on AFCON and the impact it has on players and teams.
Yeah,
and players looking forward to a World Cup year, right? If you're that good. So, shit, I think that was absolutely solid. So let's quickly shift over to the EPL. I got the odds here in front of us, but before that, Scotty, just any notable transfers we want to talk about, Club World Cup performances, anything? I know, Poole, we briefly mentioned Wirtz, but to me, that's obviously the buy of the summer so far, because to me, that is a generational player that Liverpool have picked up. Thoughts on him, thoughts on what City's doing, and then we could quickly get into the odds for EPL futures.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Wirtz super talented, but I think what that signals to me, along with some of the fullback signings in Kirkes and Frimpong, is probably a change in style for the season compared to what they did last year. I think Slot came in and really tried to keep things pretty similar to how Klopp had set the team up, especially with not having any major incoming transfers in either the windows where he was in charge. And I think now, given his obvious success in the first season and perhaps, a sign of intent or confidence from FSG, they're going to kind of let him, bring in the players that are going to fit the system that's probably more suited to what he's done in the past, especially in Eredivisie. So I think we'll see a little bit of a change in the Liverpool setup. I think, similar to Milan. I think there's still going to be probably 2 or 3 more players coming in. I think a center back is going to have to come in at some point. Probably another center forward of some type, especially if Nunez goes. Yeah. So still lots to come, but yeah, it's an exciting time for Liverpool because I think we're starting to see what the next era will look like. I think this championship or the title that they won this year kind of bookends the Klopp era, gives Slot the strong platform to build on. But now we're going to really get to see like what the Slot era is going to look like, hopefully for the next 7-10 years. But who's to say? Otherwise, yeah, I mean, Arsenal, I think there's a lot of pressure on them right now.
Will they ever get a forward?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is I think fans are relatively certain that they want to trust Arteta, that he's gotten them as close as they've been in well over a decade to a title, and that they're just missing 1 or 2 key pieces. And if they don't get those 1 or 2 key pieces in the summer window and they go another season where they waste an opportunity, I think there'll be some pretty vitriolic comments from Arsenal supporters this season. I think they'll be pretty fed up and ready for change. So I think it's a pivotal season for Arsenal. They really need to get some major success, not just like a EFL Cup type success. Like they need to either win the league or they need to maybe win Champions League. Either of those. And then City, I mean, it's probably Pep's last season, right? Like he keeps signing these 1-year deals. I think it's probably his last season. I think he knew. I think last season was going to be his last season, but with the
wanted to go out on top
issues that they kind of had, he wanted to like get one more shot. So we'll see. I mean, you never know how the season plays out, but we'll certainly have a new look City, a refreshed City. I don't expect Haaland to have. I mean, it's kind of weird to say his last year was disappointing, but I think I think he'll be much more like we saw in his first season at City. Looking at 30 plus goals potentially. And
they got a lot younger last year, or at least they fielded teams to me that seemed a lot younger.
It looked fresher,
right? Like almost trying to. I don't. Not that this was their intent, but you could say
their defense
trying to emulate PSG. Dynamic wingers run at you for 90 minutes. Now they brought in Reinders. They brought in Cherokee, who I think is right under Wirtz.
He's not even Cherokee's not even like a Pep player,
right?
Which
he's
makes
like too good to be a Pep player, almost. You know what I mean?
Because he has fun. Yeah,
it's interesting because does he start? That's kind of like my question right now. Like
he's gonna have to learn a new position almost, like to get on the field.
So, and a lot of people have been pointing out that he hasn't even played with Haaland yet during the Club World Cup. They've never been on the field at the same time, which I don't know if that's something that Pep is thinking. Maybe Cherokee's kind of like a way to give Haaland a rest and keep him healthy throughout the season. We'll see. But yeah.
So the thing with Arsenal, I think they really are 2 players away. I think that they've been so close for so long, and I really don't blame Arteta as much. I don't, because I see what Liverpool had prior to even Slot being there and what was being built for so many years, and a complete team in almost every single position. Arteta never had that. They were playing catch up to Liverpool as well. Liverpool were rivals to some of the best English teams ever in City. Centurion teams, Klopp teams that had 90-something points that would have won leagues multiple times over. Everyone is just like Arteta and them. They need to beat Pep. They're overlooking Liverpool because Liverpool also had an incredible foundation. And guess what? You guys just reloaded big time, and so did City. Yep. And every single time, you guys fall short or even City fall short, they invest like entire countries' GDPs into the transfer market. Arsenal half-ass stuff. Like they're not actually like going further forward into like Kai Havertz is one move, yes, but you need multiple. Zubimendi, I really like if they get that done, but what does it matter if you don't have Sesko or Yerkes? You don't have a striker. They don't have a top tier striker at all.
They played 8 Premier League matches last year where they started a midfielder as their striker.
Yeah,
that's it was Marino, right?
Yep, Marino.
So and he unironically did well, but it's sort of like you're telling me you don't add in a guaranteed 15 to 20 goal league scorer that they can't compete. You know what I mean? Like they're right there. I think it's a disservice for Kroenke not to do that. Also, this is Arsenal. This is a cash cow. This is a Premier League. They generate the most money.
Highest ticket prices in the country.
To not invest in what their sports portfolio is too, with the Nuggets, the Rams, they are fine, man. You're telling me you can't go all in on a player like this? Even FSG, with how they're ran sometimes, they still paid up money for Darwin Núñez, who everyone knew that was an overpay at the time, and Liverpool overpaid. You're telling me Arsenal can't do it? That's where now Arsenal is the interesting one.
Because I'm going to hit you guys with the counterpoint to all that. Have they or have they not been figured out to an extent where should we fear them because they've done the same thing for the past 6 years, or whether they get another player or not?
No, I don't think so. No. I think Saka being hurt for so long was such a huge.
Yep. And look, injuries are going to happen too, right? So that may happen this year. But I think the problem that Arsenal had ran into the last couple seasons is that they faded hard when they got to that March, April. Like once you get to that March international break, that's where they really start to hit a wall and they drop off. And that's just going to happen when you're, we kind of talk about on the pod sometimes next where, like in the NBA, they kind of say you can't just make a finals in your first season making the playoffs. You kind of have to work your way through a couple seasons and figure out how to sustain that intensity through a long season. And I think that's kind of what Arsenal had been going through the last 2 or 3 years. It's you have to figure out a way to not blow your load in the first 4 months of a season, run your legs to jelly, and then all of a sudden you're dropping games.
That's their depth too.
But that's almost my point. You have to do that in the first 4 or 5 months of the season because you can't get 10, 12 points behind City or Liverpool. Then you give yourself no chance.
But I'm saying I think the players have kind of figured out they've gone through 2 or 3 seasons. I think they were also younger too, right? So really their forward line is now their average age is 25, 26. They're in their prime. And so I think this is really the proverbial window where they really should be. If you are the management of Arsenal right now and you have a center forward or a striker that you believe in, and that asking price is anything below 120 million euros, it's probably worth it because that's really the last piece to potentially winning, a title of some high caliber.
It would make the most waves if they won the title. In the sport, besides if United miraculously turn things around, they are really just right their way. Also MLS and Nawari, these two youngsters are incredible. I know Yamal gets a lot of the props and rightfully so, but those two players were incredible. MLS is a very versatile player. He's really, really impressive. Nawari himself, he looks like he's already 25, in his prime. He's just super talent.
He's probably the only reason why they finished above City last season. They were almost about to drop out below City, but he came in and provided a second wave.
How much better are they next year? Right? They're I think going to take another level. And I'm not the subscriber of getting on Saka, but I think Saka has to reach a new height.
Well, that's 100%. It's are you who you are, which is top 10% of players or 15% of players, or are you top 5% of players? That's kind of the discussion.
He's their golden boy. He needs to.
He's not a boy anymore.
Right? Yeah, no. Yeah. He needs to have that signature moment and stretch where he doesn't have to put the team on his back, but where he's winning games. Right. Same thing could be said for Odegaard, where it just feels like these crop of players are just. They're coming up short where it's a little, are you going to be Liverpool where they finally got over the hump? And I know it's different circumstances. Or are you going to be like those Spurs teams under Poch where you were really good, make some good runs in the Champions League, and then you have nothing to show for it? Yeah. I think that's kind of where they're at. But Liverpool, I think are insane. That was a great window. I don't really see how you guys struggle after that. Are you doing anything after Darwin? I think is my biggest question.
Still need some goals somewhere, right?
I think they'll sell Darwin. They're still going to sell Harvey Elliott. There's going to be a lot of. That? I'm fine with it because he just doesn't. Okay. He's behind Salah. Really, he's too slow. Really, to play on the wing. He's not an attacking midfielder. So I'm fine with if right now where he was the MVP of the U21 whatever Euros. Yeah,
it's 23 and the 21s. Yeah,
cash in now. If Brighton want to send over 45 million pounds for him, then by all means, reinvest that. And they're doing a lot of buyback clauses too, like they did with Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa, I think to me was a little bit more of a concerning move because Kwanzaa at 20, 21 years old could be a center back that takes over for Van Dijk in 2 years, right?
Konate is. Did they even extend him yet?
He's probably going to go to Real Madrid on a free next season. So that's why it's like I think they're going to bring in the center back of some type. Quanta, they have a buyback clause, so even if he kills it at Leverkusen, they can bring him back.
Is Diaz going?
Diaz, I think, is going to stay. They've kind of gave FU prices to both Barcelona and Bayern. I think Diaz is just trying to get a new contract because his current contract is up in 2 years, and I don't think Liverpool are interested in extending him because he's 28, and they don't really need him in his age 32 season.
He's inconsistent.
Yeah. I've never been the biggest Diaz fan. Dude works really hard, but his output is just, it lacks. Like he'll go 12 games without a goal or assist, and when you're playing with someone like Salah, that's like really hard to do.
Right.
And then you have Gakpo come in, and if Gakpo could stay healthy, like I think he would own that left wing.
He's talented. Spot. He's versatile. Yeah, I like him.
So right, I mean, I'm optimistic a bit about where Liverpool how they'll look during the games, and where they should be winning a lot. But as far as what other teams around them are doing, we talked about like City. I don't expect them to have a down year again. Rodri will be back, and he makes a world of difference for them.
Chelsea, Newcastle outside.
Newcastle, I'm gonna knock on wood and say I'm not super concerned because they have that same issue where like Aston Villa had it last year. They had it 2 years ago, where now they're back in Champions League. They got to kind of figure out how to fight on two fronts again. Their forward line depth is not great, and with Isak's
always hurt.
Kind of, and he also has like half a foot out too. Like he's
always hurt.
He's going to play this season.
Who but someone will pay $100 million for.
Mm-hmm.
In today's
market. Oh, absolutely.
Liverpool might.
Right.
But
they should, quite honestly.
Yeah.
All right, let's throw them out. Liverpool plus 185, current favorites. City at plus 225. Arsenal at plus 250. Then you have Newcastle plus 1400. Chelsea plus 1750. United's in there somewhere. The next one that makes sense to me is
3200.
Yeah, okay. Don't bet that, anybody. Aston Villa plus 5,000, and then there's a bunch of other plus 5,000s or whatever. So nothing for me to get excited about with the top three, at those numbers. But what do you guys? What's your outlook? Is anybody worth taking a flyer on? Like Chelsea at plus 1750 jumps out to me. Not that I think they're going to win the league, but best chance of anyone.
They're always wild cards, right? They're loaded with talent. They're always spending money, and it's like at some point, will one of these weird configurations of I don't call them superstars, but like high talented players, will they ever actually click and work? Like at some point, you think they would.
I don't think they have a striker to do it. Is really the thing. I like Nicholas Jackson as a player, similar to like what you think of Nunez, but I like if I could look at a TV and say I could do a better job finishing,
yes,
and that's like a problem. I'm not to say like I actually believe that, but it's like a tongue-in-cheek comment. I just don't think Chelsea have Cole Palmer is great, but I don't also think he's that elite of a goal scorer. I don't subscribe to that.
He shouldn't have to be. That's the thing.
What happened?
I don't think he should have to be. Like
yes, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of the issue. I just don't see like it was Delap, right? Was the guy that they signed?
Liam Delap. Yep.
Liam Delap. Like it's if you told me that they got Isak, and I'd be like, okay, then but they don't. So like, yeah, I guess I would take them over Newcastle, but all these other teams once a week, like no thanks. I would stick to the top three, and I'm going with City because City invested too much money.
Yeah, I mean City at plus 250. I know Nick, you say like you probably wait till December and get that number, but with City,
maybe not.
You don't know.
That's like potentially the best number you'll get them at.
Because a lot of times we see City with a minus sign in front of them.
Agree.
So
what did sorry, it might be difficult off the top of your head. The year after they lost the title to Liverpool, how many points did they win the league by? I felt like did they run away with it the year after? Because we've seen them actually like the last few times that they have lost the league, they come back and win it the next year, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's because they very rarely go back-to-back years without winning it.
Right?
The last
that's
years,
like
right?
It's just. I think the Leicester year, the year you guys won, like they go back and they win it in this Pep era. So it's kind of hard to bet against them.
Yeah, it looks like
that crazy to say.
They won it by 1 point, 93 points. Liverpool had 92.
So many good teams that just didn't win, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, actually, I remember that one. This is a personal problem of mine. That was the game I was in Hawaii on my honeymoon, and they were losing to Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa team,
Oh my God.
2-0, and then they came back and won it in the second half by scoring 3 goals, and that's how they won it. Thanks for that memory, Martino.
All right. Well, you have 2005, so
Yeah.
that's all I got. I won't ramble anymore, fellas.
Yeah, no, Johnny's here. What a dynasty Balotelli started. That's a fact. And Mancini, let's not forget.
Thanks.
Roberto's first triumph as coach.
No,
super
look at top four, Nick.
Super
I was just going to throw
here,
this out. Chelsea at plus 200 for top 4 is interesting. I feel like they're likely to slide in. So if you don't like any of those numbers for champion, top 4 is decent.
I like that. Yeah,
I like it a lot.
If you gun to your head, so Tottenham and United are both plus 400, plus 450 ish for top 4. Gun to your head, which of those 2 teams would you take?
Tottenham.
If you had to take one.
I'm sorry. You said Newcastle. I'm sorry.
No, Tottenham and United, Manchester United. Excuse me.
Spurs
for finishing top 4, they're right around plus 400, plus 450.
Tottenham, I guess. Yeah.
United is just the same problems are there.
Yeah.
And it's
Who's their
just
coach? I don't even know.
Who? Emery.
Oh,
Amorim.
Yeah,
yes.
I've already forgot about that.
Not for long though.
I like Thomas Frank actually. I think he's a respectable coach.
Yeah,
I think he's pretty good.
I was gonna say that's
but
the
it's
thing.
It's very like kind of a complacent hire by Spurs. I don't think it's like a really like
that's all they do.
Yeah, right. But it's just more reliable one. I think they had a lot of injuries. I know they were terrible. I understand the sacking of Ange, but they did have a lot of injuries. United, on the other hand, like they're just that shit. Like it's bad. So I'm not sure. We could also see him get sacked within. It would be a very United thing to do. Like if he's sacked by Halloween. I don't.
I don't think Amorim finishes the season.
I'd be stunned. They would have to. No way. They would. The only way he finishes the season is if they do get top 4, I guess. Right? Yeah. Like what do they have to do, or what does he have to do? It has to be a drastic turnaround. I don't know.
I mean they got to be sitting in the top 6 all year long. If they're sitting in like 8th or 9th place and having their negative press stories as they normally do, I think he's out.
I know it's like United, but these teams were literally flirting with relegation, and they were fortunate enough that the relegation teams were actually historically awful.
Yeah, 2 years running.
Right, but 2 years running. The thing is, like most years, one of the 2 gets relegated.
Yeah. I think that's the unfortunate side of the Premier League now is that there's so much money in it that these teams that have been in it for 2 or 3 years have kind of been able to build up enough of a squad that it's going to be really hard for, a championship side to come in and upset one of them. But we'll see. I mean, Leeds, Burnley, Sunderland, definitely not Sunderland. I think they're on the way back. Probably same with Burnley. Can Leeds upset a Wolves or a Fulham maybe potentially?
Could see it.
All
right, sweet. Well, shit, man. Martino, thank you again for hopping on with us, brother, and spending an hour and a half to go through all the bullshit. Let everybody know what you're up to, where they can find you if they don't already, which at this point they should.
Yeah, it's just Martino Puccio everywhere. Mostly AC Milan stuff, some Mets stuff, which I actually got a couple DMs of people like, can you stop talking about baseball? So sorry. But yeah, it's just mostly Milan stuff. Every now and then doing the betting when I don't bet like every weekend on the league because I can't watch the games, unfortunately, as much as I used to, but mostly futures these days and other stuff like that. Canada ticket burned up in my face, those bozos. I mean, this was like the cup for them to do that, and they just spit in my face. So
Jonathan David overrated. You heard it right here from my mouth.
Hey man, did anyone see him score those goals? I don't know, but
what goals? The penalties?
The Ciro Immobile of Canada. How about that?
No.
Yeah, you don't like it, but yeah, no, I appreciate getting on and talking with you fellas. Always great. Coach as well. Wishing him well. Happy 4th of July to everybody as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you again, everybody in the chat. Shout out, you guys. Appreciate you rocking with us. Follow us, YouTube, Twitter, and Kick, I believe now.
Yes, sir.
Streaming on those 3 platforms. So like, subscribe, share. Appreciate everybody. Have a wonderful 4th of July. We'll be back with you next week.